Did I go too far kicking him out after he wrecked my home? A couple of nights ago, while I was out in the city with my partner, I got a call from a nearby resident letting me know there were several unfamiliar cars parked outside my place and loud music coming from inside. Confused and immediately irritated, I asked them to knock and see what was going on. They were told it was a party, which made my blood boil, because I had already been very clear that no gatherings were allowed without my explicit approval. For some context, my sibling had recently split from his long-term partner and needed a temporary place to stay. I agreed to let him move into a spare room while he saved up from his job to get back on his feet. In exchange, we set a few basic expectations to help keep the house clean, pitch in where needed, and respect the rules of the home. One of those rules was absolutely no parties unless I said yes. As soon as I heard what was happening, I headed straight home. When I walked in, the music was still blasting, the house was a mess, and there were drunk strangers everywhere. Cups were scattered across the floors, alcohol had been spilled, and it was clear the place had been completely disrespected. I shut the party down immediately and told everyone to leave. After they cleared out, my sibling and I got into a heated argument that escalated fast. In the end, I told him to pack up and leave that night. The damage was obvious once things were quiet. The living area was trashed, there was broken glass on the floor and sticky alcohol stains everywhere. The following day, he called me and started another fight, calling me names and accusing me of being heartless and unreasonable for throwing him out so late. Now I'm stuck wondering whether I crossed the line by kicking him out immediately, even though he ignored my rules and left my home in ruins. Was I justified in drawing that hard boundary, or did I take it too far? Was I wrong to keep him out of this chapter? I'm a woman in my early 30s who was in a 2-year relationship with a man slightly older than me, and the relationship itself was often tense and emotionally draining. Near the end, we had a particularly bad weekend after he became convinced that a stranger was flirting with me while we were out running errands. Because of that, he completely shut me out and refused to speak to me for days. We weren't living together full time at that point, and during the same weekend I ended up in the hospital after learning I was both expecting and losing that pregnancy at the same time. I tried calling him from the hospital, but he ignored my calls. A close friend of mine, who lives in another state, managed to get through to him and explained what was happening. Even after hearing that, he didn't come to the hospital, didn't check on me, and didn't reach out at all. I didn't hear a word from him until several days later. What hurt most was that he never apologized, and when it eventually came up, he brushed it off by saying the situation had resolved itself. I couldn't move past that, and we ended the relationship not long after. About a year later, he contacted me again out of the blue. He said he wanted to talk about what happened back then and asked to see the medical imaging from the hospital visit. I told him no, explaining that because of how he behaved during that time, I didn't feel he had any right to more information or to see those images. He reacted badly, lashing out and calling me names. Now I'm left wondering if refusing his request was justified, or if I crossed a line by shutting him out completely after everything that happened. When helping a coworker backfires at work, was I wrong to say no? I work on a small team, and a new colleague, let's call him Marcus, joined recently. Our desks are close and our responsibilities overlap, so I've answered questions and helped him get up to speed. Over time, I developed my own reporting system and layout that makes a recurring task faster and cleaner. It's something I refine gradually and rely on heavily. A while back, Marcus asked how I put my report together and whether I could send him my template. I told him I was happy to explain my process and walk him through it, but I wasn't comfortable handing over my exact file. Instead, I stayed late one evening and showed him everything step by step, where the data comes from, the order I do things, what details matter, and what to avoid. He took notes, thanked me, and seemed appreciative. At the next team meeting, Marcus presented his report for the first time. As he talked, it became obvious that the structure, phrasing, and flow were nearly identical to mine, even down to a couple of expressions I usually use. When our supervisor asked how he built it, Marcus brushed it off as something he put together himself, without mentioning any help. After the meeting, I privately told him that I was glad it went well, but felt uncomfortable hearing my exact setup presented with no acknowledgement. He got defensive and said he didn't owe anyone credit for assistance, then accused me of being insecure for bringing it up. Since then, he's repeatedly asked for the actual template again, saying it would save time and that he already understands it. I said no, but told him I'd still answer questions if he gets stuck. He's been distant ever since, and I've heard through others that he's calling me a gatekeeper and saying I'm making things difficult. A few coworkers think I should just send the file to keep the peace because it's a collaborative workplace. I don't want to cause tension, but I also feel like I already went out of my way to help and don't trust how my work would be handled if I handed it over. Am I wrong for holding that boundary? Is it wrong to say no to babysitting after one broken rule? I have 2 young children, with my oldest just out of toddlerhood. For a long time, that child was extremely attached to a comfort item we eventually had to eliminate completely. It wasn't a gentle process either. We went through weeks of disrupted sleep, stress, and setbacks before finally getting to a place where the habit was fully gone. It took months before there were no relapses at all, and even then it only worked because every adult in our child's life followed the same rules without exception. After we welcomed our second baby, things were surprisingly smooth at first. Our older child understood that the comfort items belonged to the baby and even helped pass them over when needed without trying to use them personally. That balance fell apart after a family member watched the kids one afternoon. When we came home, we found our older child asleep using one of those items again. According to the babysitter, the child had been crying and she didn't want to let that continue, so she used the quickest solution. That single decision completely unraveled months of progress. Since then, we've been dealing with daily struggles hiding items around the house, stopping our older child from taking them from the baby, and managing intense meltdowns whenever access is denied. It's exhausting, and every episode feels like reopening a wound we worked incredibly hard to close. Now, the same family member wants to watch the kids again. My partner and I decided we're not comfortable with that, given what happened and the ongoing fallout. She's taken this badly and has told other relatives and friends that we're being unfair and punishing her for trying to calm a distressed child. We've stood firm, but the tension is growing and I'm starting to wonder if we're being too rigid. From our perspective, this wasn't a small mistake, it had lasting consequences we're still dealing with. But I'm curious whether others would see our refusal as unreasonable or overly harsh. When does protecting someone's routine cross into ignoring real pain? I'm a teenage girl living at home with my family, including my younger brother who is autistic. He has a very strict nighttime routine where he comes downstairs late, watches television alone in the living room, and eventually falls asleep on the couch. My parents have always treated this routine as non-negotiable because disrupting it usually leads to meltdowns and conflict, so everyone else is expected to work around it. Over the past year, my physical health has gotten worse. I have a connective tissue condition that causes joint instability along with a curved spine, which leads to constant shoulder and upper back pain. My mattress is extremely old and was passed down through siblings before me, and the padding is completely worn out. I can feel the metal frame through it no matter how I lie. Spending too much time in bed causes sharp pain and stiffness, and I often wake up feeling worse than when I went to sleep. I also need a long period to wind down at night, which makes lying on that mattress even more painful. To manage this, on nights when the pain becomes overwhelming, I go downstairs to sit on the couch and watch television for a while before going to bed. This helps reduce how long I am stuck on the mattress and actually makes a noticeable difference in my pain levels. I do not do this every night, only when the discomfort has built up too much. I also do not try to force my brother out of the room. I simply ask that if he stays, he uses headphones or keeps his volume low so we can both exist in the space. Recently, my brother has started taking issue with this and complaining to my parents. Most of the time they immediately side with him, saying that his routine should not be interrupted. When I explain that I am dealing with real physical pain, it's brushed off as me exaggerating, even though these conditions run in the family. One night, after I warned him ahead of time that I would be downstairs, he went upstairs to yell at our parents. When he came back down, he was angry and verbally aggressive toward me and deliberately played videos at full volume to cause trouble. What makes this harder is that he has other options. He has a computer and full access to entertainment in his own room. I also technically have a television in my bedroom, but using it means sitting or lying on the bed that is actively causing my pain. Despite this, expectation is still that I should be the one to move, adjust, and endure the discomfort so his routine remains untouched. I feel guilty for upsetting the balance in the house, but I also feel like my health is constantly being dismissed. It feels like I am expected to suffer quietly because it is easier for everyone else. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, I'm just trying to manage my pain in the only way that helps. When family help is one-sided, is it wrong to finally say no? I'm the oldest sibling in my family, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one picking up the slack from my younger sister. When she was in university, I helped her revise papers and talked her through personal problems. If she got stranded somewhere, I'd rearrange my schedule to get her home. Over time, it became clear that this dynamic wasn't mutual. She's in her mid-20s now, and both another sibling, and I have noticed that she rarely goes out of her way to help anyone else in the family. I brought this up to her once, and she said she understood and would try to do better. Not long ago, she asked if she could host her engagement celebration at my home. I agreed, even though it was a big ask, and I helped with planning details as well. Around the same time, I was juggling work, parenting, and logistics. One evening, while driving home, traffic came to a complete standstill due to a major accident. What should have been a short drive turned into several hours. My partner was also stuck elsewhere, and I started getting calls from my kids' childcare provider asking why I hadn't arrived yet. They charged steep late fees, and it was clear I wasn't getting there anytime soon. My sister lives very close to the childcare centre, so I called her and asked if she could pick the kids up and keep them with her for a few hours until we made it back. I explained the situation, and even offered to send her money to cover any inconvenience. She flatly refused, saying she wanted a quiet evening to herself, and then ended the call. I was left scrambling and eventually reached out to a relative who lives much farther away. They drove over, picked up the kids, and stayed at our place until we finally got home late that night. That incident really stuck with me. I felt hurt and angry, especially given how often I've gone out of my way for her in the past. After talking it through with my partner, we decided we were done continuing a one-sided pattern. I messaged my sister and told her that family support should go both ways, and that it was clear she only wanted help, not to offer it. I also told her I would no longer be hosting her engagement event or doing favours for her. She called after that, and the conversation quickly turned into a heated argument. I told her she was acting selfishly, and she accused me of being petty and overreacting. I'm still upset about the whole situation, and genuinely want to know, was I wrong for finally drawing a hard line? Is it unfair to enjoy my own meals during a roommate's recovery? I live with a housemate who recently underwent a medical procedure and has been restricted to a very plain recovery diet that excludes most of the food she usually loves. She's been understandably frustrated about it for weeks. I'm in my late 20s and work a demanding job that often keeps me out late, especially one evening a week when I have to commute to a distant branch office, which adds a long drive on both ends of the day. By the time I get home on those nights, I'm exhausted and starving, so I usually pick up takeout as a small way to decompress and enjoy my evening. One night I grabbed a dish I'd been craving, which also happens to be one of my housemate's favourite meals. I ate it casually in a shared living space while watching a show, didn't comment on it, and stored the leftovers in a separate fridge so they wouldn't affect her at all. The next morning, though, she was noticeably passive-aggressive and told me I'd been inconsiderate for eating foods she likes while she can't have them. She went on to say that everyone in the house should avoid eating her favourite things around her until she's fully recovered, because seeing them makes her feel worse. I sympathise with the fact that recovery is hard and limiting, but I also feel that working long hours and taking care of myself includes being able to eat what I want, especially when I wasn't intentionally rubbing it in or interfering with her diet in any way. Now I'm stuck wondering whether enjoying my own food in shared spaces during her recovery really makes me unfair, or if this is an unreasonable expectation being placed on everyone else. Is it wrong to draw a line over public hygiene? I'm a woman in my late 30s who had planned all day to visit a large, busy retail complex after finishing work. My partner, who is a few years younger than me, came over that evening, and I gave him several reminders that we would be leaving soon so he had time to get ready. Before we left, I asked if he had brought shoes with him, which is a long-standing point of tension in our relationship. He told me he hadn't. I have explained many times that while he is free to choose not to wear shoes when he leaves the house, I am also free to decide whether I want to be involved in that choice. I told him that I find going barefoot in crowded, upscale public spaces unsanitary and uncomfortable. He immediately accused me of insulting him and calling him disgusting as a person. I clarified that I wasn't attacking him personally, only the behaviour of walking barefoot in a packed shopping centre. During the drive, I told him that if he wasn't willing to wear shoes, he would need to stay in the car while I went inside. I reminded him again that this was the result of his decision, not a punishment. He then escalated things by accusing me of not wanting to spend time with him, not wanting to be with him at all, and deliberately shaming him. From my perspective, this boundary has been clearly communicated many times, and I followed through on exactly what I had said before. From his perspective, he feels judged and rejected. Now I'm left wondering whether standing firm on this issue makes me unreasonable, or whether it's fair to set limits around behaviour that makes me deeply uncomfortable. Am I wrong for using a food pantry when I am barely getting by? I recently shared a photo online of groceries I received from a local food pantry because I was honestly relieved and excited to finally have consistent access to food. After an intake interview, I was approved for one prepared meal a day and one grocery pickup each week. For the first time in a while, I felt a little bit of pressure lift. Not long after I posted, an acquaintance reached out to criticize me and accuse me of taking resources away from homeless people. This caught me off guard, especially since we barely talk. It made me feel embarrassed and conflicted about something that it felt like a small win. For context, my partner and I are both in our early 20s and together we bring in around $1,800 a month. Our rent alone is $1,400, and that does not include utilities, transportation costs, insurance, or basic necessities. By the time everything is paid, there is almost nothing left. Most months we are scraping by and stressing about how to eat. Some people in my life seem to think I am doing something wrong because I have parents and grandparents who are better off financially. I have asked them for help before, but I am not comfortable having to rely on family every single week just to meet a basic need like food. I am actively applying for a second job and my partner is doing the same. We are trying hard to improve our situation on our own. What hurts the most is being made to feel guilty for feeling relieved. I was not bragging or trying to take advantage of anything. I was simply grateful to have helped during a really difficult time. Food is a basic necessity, and it feels unfair that anyone should be shamed for needing support to survive. I keep going back and forth in my head wondering if I did something wrong, or if I am just someone who genuinely needs help right now and accepted it. I am trying my best to get back on my feet, but I am struggling to understand why that makes me a bad person in someone else's eyes. Did I do anything wrong by keeping cards I was told were a gift? In early winter, a colleague from work offered me a large collection of trading cards that she said her partner no longer wanted. I agreed, and she ended up handing over several briefcases packed full of cards. As I started sorting through them, I realized there were a significant number of valuable ones mixed in with the bulk, some worth quite a bit individually. That raised a red flag for me, so I messaged my colleague to double check that her partner truly meant to give away the entire collection, especially knowing there was real value involved. She reassured me that it was intentional, said he no longer played, and told me to enjoy them. Taking her at her word, I kept the cards. I built a few decks for myself, traded some with other players, and sold a portion to a local game shop, making a few $100s in the process. Everything seemed settled until months later, when my colleague approached me at work and asked for all the cards back. She admitted that she had never actually asked her partner before giving them away and that he was furious when he found out. I told her I was willing to return whatever cards I still had, but explained that many had already been traded or sold and were no longer in my possession. That answer upset her further, and she insisted that I also hand over the money I had made so her partner could try to replace the missing cards. I refused, explaining that I had acted in good faith based on what she told me and that I was already compromising by returning what remained. The conversation escalated. She accused me of making things worse, and eventually stormed off. Since then, she has barely spoken to me, and I am left holding the remaining cards while the situation stays tense at work. To be clear, I had warned her up front that some of the cards were valuable, and the collection itself was mostly low-value items with a smaller number of expensive ones mixed in. I have no direct relationship with her partner, and she is the only channel I have to return anything to him. Later, I managed to contact him directly, share proof that I had confirmed the gift beforehand, and arranged to give back what I still had. He told me not to worry about the sold or traded cards and planned to resolve the financial side directly with her. Even so, the whole situation has left me wondering whether I handled this as fairly as I could, or if I crossed a line by keeping what I was told was mine. Is privacy too much to ask on a long family trip? I'm feeling completely worn down after a situation with my partner's family that's left me questioning whether I was wrong for finally speaking up. His relatives strongly pressured everyone to travel out of province for a milestone birthday celebration for an elderly family member, a trip that would take close to 20 hours round trip by car. Because my partner and I are under serious financial strain right now due to ongoing fertility treatments and related expenses, they offered to cover the hotel costs so we could attend. At first that sounded generous until it became clear there was an expectation attached. Every other sibling and their partner were automatically given their own private hotel rooms, but because we don't have children, it was assumed that we would share a room with the older relatives. This isn't new either. I've been put in this position multiple times in the past, and each time I felt extremely uncomfortable but stayed quiet to keep the peace. This time, though, the idea of another long trip with no personal space felt overwhelming, so I finally said something. I calmly explained that my partner and I needed our own room, not as a luxury, but as a basic boundary for our comfort and mental well-being. The response caught me off guard. I was told that if we wanted our own room, we would need to help pay for it ourselves, even though no one else was being asked to do so. It felt like we were being singled out and quietly punished for not having kids, something that's already a painful topic for us. I tried to explain that privacy is important to me and that sharing a room makes me anxious and on edge, especially during an emotionally loaded family event, but the conversation quickly turned into guilt and pressure. Eventually, feeling dismissed and cornered, I said that if having our own room wasn't an option, then we simply wouldn't be able to attend. Their decision immediately created tension, and now I'm left sitting with a mix of anger, sadness, and doubt. On one hand, I feel like I finally set a reasonable boundary after years of discomfort. On the other, I'm being made to feel like I'm ungrateful or difficult for not just going along with what was expected of me. I can't help but wonder whether standing up for my need for privacy was unfair, or if it was something I should have done a long time ago. Was I wrong for feeling pressure to give up something I paid for? Years ago, I bought a used motorcycle with my own money, spending a few $1,000s after saving up for a long time. My partner at the time came along with me to look it over and talk with the seller. During the conversation, the seller casually mentioned that she had recently upgraded a part on the bike. My partner immediately asked if she still had the original part. She did, and he then asked if she would include it with the bike. She agreed, so when I paid for the motorcycle, it also came with the extra component, which was worth a few $100s on its own. Once we got back home, my partner took the extra part and started photographing it so he could list it online for sale. I told him I thought it was smart of him to think to ask for it and said I would be happy to split the money from the sale with him. He flatly refused and said the part was entirely his, arguing that we would not have it at all if he had not thought to ask for it in the first place. I disagreed and said that while the idea was his, the item only came with the purchase because I paid for the motorcycle. Still, I wanted to be fair, so I suggested we split the proceeds evenly. What followed was a big argument. He insisted he was entitled to all the money, and I felt increasingly pressured and worn down by the conflict. Eventually, I gave in and let him keep the part and all the money from selling it, which amounted to a few $100s. Even at the time, I had an uneasy feeling that I had been pushed into agreeing just to keep the peace. Looking back, I can understand his argument to a degree, since the idea came from him, but I have always felt that I was bullied into giving up something that was included in a purchase I made with my own money. We are no longer together, and this happened a long time ago, but it has always stood out to me as one of those situations where I wondered whether I was being unreasonable or whether my instincts about the situation were right all along. Was I wrong for keeping a backyard statue that made a visiting parent uncomfortable? My partner Lena and I live on the opposite side of the country from my family, so visits are rare. Last winter, my parents decided to fly out and stay with us for about 2 weeks, making it one of the longest stretches of time we'd spent together in years. In our backyard, we have a plastic statue of a folk saint that Lena feels a strong personal connection to. She created a small outdoor space around it where she leaves offerings and spends time, and it also reminds her of her own mother, who passed away a few years ago and shared an interest in the figure. The saint has a complicated reputation and is often misunderstood due to media portrayals and negative groups that have tried to claim the imagery, but for Lena it represents protection, comfort, and a sense of belonging rather than anything dark or threatening. A couple of days into my parents' visit, my mother finally noticed the statue through the kitchen window. She, visibly startled, hurried back inside, and later asked if we could remove it or hide it for the duration of their stay because it made her uneasy. I explained that it belonged to Lena and had personal meaning, and that it was simply a decorative statue in our own yard. When my father later asked me again to move it for my mother's sake, I refused once more. After that, my mother avoided the backyard entirely and made a point of turning away from windows where the statue was visible, clearly distressed by its presence. When my parents were leaving, my father told me he was disappointed and felt I hadn't cared enough about my mother's discomfort during their visit, while I felt it was unreasonable to expect us to cover up something meaningful in our own home, especially since we aren't religious and never raised with strong beliefs around such things. I'm left wondering whether standing my ground was justified, or whether I should have compromised simply because my parents had travelled so far to see us. Was I wrong for refrigerating a stranger's grocery delivery? After recently moving into a new apartment, I found several bags of groceries left outside my door that clearly were not mine. The order included frozen and refrigerated items, and I had no idea who they belonged to or how long they had been sitting there. Because I did not want the food to spoil, I decided to put everything into my refrigerator and freezer for safekeeping. I kept all of it inside the original delivery bags with the tag still attached and did not open or use anything. At the time, I assumed the previous tenant may have forgotten to update their address, and for all I knew they could have moved far away or might not realize the mistake for days. A few hours later, a woman knocked on my door and showed me a photo on her phone of the groceries sitting outside my unit. Relieved that the owner had appeared, I went to retrieve the bags for her, but instead of thanking me, she immediately accused me of stealing her food. She raised her voice, called me inconsiderate, and insisted that I should never touch someone else's delivery. I tried to calmly explain that I had no way of knowing who the food belonged to or when they would come looking for it, and that I had only stored it to prevent waste. None of it seemed to matter to her, and she continued to scold me, telling me that next time I should leave the food outside even if it spoiled. I live in an apartment complex where temperatures fluctuate a lot, especially in winter, so leaving perishables outdoors did not seem safe or reasonable to me. I also considered contacting the delivery company, but since I was not the one who placed the order, I doubted they could help much in the moment. I genuinely thought holding onto the groceries temporarily was the most responsible option. Now I am left wondering whether my logic was flawed, or if I was simply trying to do the right thing and became an easy target for someone else's frustration. Am I wrong for calling out my siblings' behaviour when everyone says it's harmless? I'm a woman in my late 20s, married to my husband, who's about the same age. We've been together for years and have a solid relationship that I've always felt secure in. Until recently, I never had a reason to question anything between us or feel uneasy about our dynamic. My younger sister, who's in her mid-20s, has always been very involved in our lives. She visits often, chats with my husband frequently, and regularly mentions how safe and comfortable she feels around him. For a long time, I didn't see this as a problem and assumed it was simply because he's a kind, trustworthy person. Things shifted when she decided to be honest with me and said she feels a very strong emotional connection to him. She stressed that she didn't mean anything inappropriate and suggested I should take it as a compliment that she trusts him so deeply. Even though she said all the right disclaimers, the conversation left me unsettled in a way I couldn't shake. After that, I started noticing patterns I'd previously ignored. She often looks to him for reassurance instead of me, subtly dismisses my opinions, and seems hurt or withdrawn if I interrupt their conversations or try to set boundaries. What once felt like closeness began to feel intrusive and uncomfortable. Eventually, I told her directly that her behaviour was crossing a line for me and that I needed her to respect my marriage. She immediately became defensive and accused me of being insecure, controlling, and projecting my own fears onto her. She said that if I were truly confident, none of this would bother me at all. When I turned to my parents for perspective, they sided with her. They told me she was just being emotionally honest and that I was turning something innocent into unnecessary drama. They keep pointing out that nothing overt has happened and imply that I'm the one creating tension in the family. Now I'm questioning myself. I feel deeply uncomfortable, but everyone around me insists that I'm imagining problems that aren't there. I can't tell if I'm overreacting or if I'm being made to doubt my own boundaries for the sake of keeping the peace. Was I wrong for not allowing family dictate my baby's life before it's even born? I am engaged to my partner, and we officially committed to each other late last year. In keeping with his cultural traditions, he visited my family home to complete the customary marriage negotiations, and everything went smoothly. At the time, I had already met his sister and had a positive impression of her. She was friendly, welcoming, and seemed genuinely supportive of our relationship. Shortly after the engagement, I travelled back to the city where my partner lives so we could spend time together. The day after I arrived, his mother invited us to a holiday lunch, and we happily accepted. That same day, however, my partner insisted on taking me to a clinic because I had been dealing with a severe illness that wasn't improving. During that visit, we unexpectedly discovered that I was already several months pregnant. I hadn't experienced the typical symptoms, so the news came as a shock, but we were excited and grateful that everything appeared to be healthy. At the family lunch, we shared the pregnancy news with his mother and sister, who initially reacted with excitement. A few traditional expectations were mentioned, including the idea that the baby's first name should be chosen by his mother. My partner immediately made it clear that naming decisions would be made by the two of us alone, and the topic was dropped. Later, while helping his sister prepare food, she brought up the idea of a celebration for the baby. I explained that my own siblings and friends might organise something once I shared the news more broadly, and she expressed happiness for me, asking to be included in the planning later on. I agreed, and the conversation ended on what seemed like a good note. A few weeks later, my partner and I attended a detailed medical appointment to check on the baby's development. Everything looked good, and we asked the doctor to write the baby's sex on a piece of paper and seal it in an envelope so we could find out later. We decided to leave the envelope with my older sibling for safekeeping. When we updated our families about the appointment, my side responded calmly and respectfully. His side, however, reacted very differently. His sister became upset and told him that the envelope should never have gone to my family. She insisted that, as the aunt from his side, she should have been involved and felt deliberately excluded. She then involved their mother, who echoed those feelings and went further by saying she should have been the one to receive the envelope and reveal the information to us. She also reminded my partner that I was joining their family through marriage and implied that decisions about the baby should be discussed with them beforehand rather than made independently. The situation escalated quickly. His mother stopped speaking to him entirely, blocked him, and told him she was stepping away from his life so he could make his own choices. His sister supported this stance, emphasizing that it had always been the three of them together and suggesting that my partner was choosing me over them. Now I'm left wondering whether setting boundaries and making decisions about our child as a couple was wrong, or whether the reaction from his family crossed a line before our baby is even born. Was I wrong for sleeping through a long trip while my partner felt alone? I had been travelling abroad with my partner, and in the days leading up to this situation I was extremely sick. I was dealing with non-stop stomach issues, nausea, and vomiting, and I barely slept for 2 nights in a row because I kept waking up to run to the bathroom. My partner was fully aware of this, since she saw it happening and knew how exhausted and unwell I was. We had a very long travel day planned and ended up choosing a 19-hour overnight coach instead of flying. The flights that were available were expensive, badly timed, and uncomfortable. Some would have had us landing in the middle of the night, and the idea of being stuck upright in a cramped plane seat while sick sounded unbearable. I paid extra for a high-end overnight bus with fully reclining seats, blankets, and pillows so we could actually rest during the trip. On the day we left, I was still feeling pretty awful, though slightly better than before. We spent part of the day stopping at multiple pharmacies so I could get medication. My partner wasn't feeling amazing either, but her symptoms were much milder than mine. Once we were on the bus, I made the decision that the best thing for my recovery was to sleep as much as possible. I took sleep medication so I could finally rest and hopefully be functional the next day. I even offered her the same medication, knowing it might help her sleep through the ride too, but she declined. I ended up sleeping for around 15 or 16 hours total. During that time, I had no idea she was upset. She never woke me up, and I didn't realize there was a problem until I woke up near the end of the ride, when she herself was asleep. Later, when she woke up, I reached for her hand and immediately sensed something was wrong. When I asked, she told me she felt abandoned and said I had left her alone the entire trip by choosing to sleep. From my point of view, I was sick, severely sleep-deprived, and trying to recover. I didn't intentionally ignore her, refuse support, or knowingly leave her upset. I truly believed resting was the healthiest option at the time. I'm torn because I understand feeling lonely on such a long trip, but I also feel like my physical condition and lack of sleep mattered too. I still don't know if prioritizing sleep in that situation was reasonable or if I should have pushed myself to stay awake despite how unwell I was. And chosen family matter more than shared blood. I lost my biological father when I was still an infant, so I have no memories of him at all. Growing up, I heard stories from my mother and older siblings, but stories never felt the same as actually knowing someone. For a large part of my childhood, there simply wasn't a father figure in my daily life. That changed when I was around 12, when my mother married Mark. From the beginning, he stepped into a parental role for me in ways that felt natural and steady, even though my older sister never fully accepted him and only tolerated his presence. That difference in how we related to Mark slowly drove a wedge between my sister and me. She carried a lot of anger about what she saw as me replacing our biological father, and she often made comments that left me feeling guilty for getting close to Mark. She accused me of being disloyal and disrespectful, as if caring about the man who was actually there for me meant I was betraying someone I never had the chance to know. Over time, the tension became exhausting, though things cooled down a bit once she moved away for school. Recently, while looking through old photo albums with my mum, I noticed pictures of my biological father taking my siblings on small amusement park trips years before he passed away. I mentioned this to Mark in passing and asked if we could do something similar, partly because I wanted the shared experience and partly because I wanted memories of my own. He happily agreed, and we spent a weekend at a new park that had only opened recently. I had a genuinely great time, took photos, and shared a few online without thinking much of it. That's when my sister exploded. She accused me of copying something sacred and claimed I was dishonoring our biological father by doing a similar activity with Mark. The argument escalated quickly, with her saying I was a terrible daughter for replacing him. After years of biting my tongue, I finally snapped and told her that, for me, Mark is my dad in every way that matters, and that if she couldn't accept that truth, then maybe she didn't get to define herself as my sister either. Now she's gone to our other sibling, and I'm being pressured to apologize to keep the peace. But I'm tired of feeling ashamed for loving the man who actually raised me and showed up in my life. I didn't choose to lose my biological father, and I don't think it's wrong to acknowledge who filled that role for me when I needed it most. Is it wrong to skip a family dinner when your medical needs aren't respected? I have a lifelong eating disorder that severely limits what foods I can tolerate, and it isn't about preference or attitude. Certain textures and flavors trigger intense nausea and make me physically ill if I try to eat them. Over the years, I've learned how to manage this quietly. I usually bring my own very simple meal to gatherings, something plain that I know is safe for me, and this has never been an issue with my family. Everyone has generally understood that this is about health, not being difficult. Recently, my sibling married Alex, and she follows a strict vegetarian lifestyle. She invited the extended family over for dinner and specifically told everyone not to worry about bringing anything. Wanting to be respectful and avoid an awkward situation, I messaged her ahead of time to ask what she planned to serve. She said she would be making a vegetable-based baked dish with pasta, which I immediately knew I wouldn't be able to eat without getting sick. I explained this to her and reminded her that I have a diagnosed condition that affects my eating. I told her I was happy to bring my usual plain meal so I could still attend and spend time with everyone. Her response caught me off guard. She told me flat out that I wasn't allowed to bring my own food and that I should just eat what was being served. When I tried to explain again that I literally couldn't do that, she brushed it off and said I was just being picky. At that point, I felt dismissed and disrespected, so I told her I wouldn't be coming to dinner. I later vented to my mom about what happened, and the situation spread through the family from there. As a result, several relatives decided not to attend the dinner either, which escalated things even more. Alex is now very upset and has tried calling me, though I haven't answered. My sibling reached out and said I could bring my own meal after all, but by then the damage felt done. Now I'm refusing to go, not because of the food anymore, but because of how easily my medical needs were invalidated and how I was spoken to. I feel like going would mean pretending that didn't matter. At the same time, I know my absence is causing tension, and I'm being told I'm being stubborn. I'm left wondering whether standing my ground is reasonable, or if skipping the dinner entirely crossed a line. Was I wrong for not remaking a dish after dinner was already cooked? I hosted a small dinner at my apartment a few evenings ago and invited a few close friends over. I genuinely enjoy cooking and wanted to do something nice, so I offered to make a full meal for everyone. The day before, I checked in with the group and asked if anyone had allergies, dietary restrictions, or preferences so I could plan accordingly. No one mentioned anything at all, so I went ahead and cooked the meal the way I usually do for myself, with bold flavours and a fair amount of seasoning. One friend, Maya, arrived early to help with setting the table and plating. While I was getting ready to serve the food, she casually mentioned that she does not like heavily seasoned dishes. I told her that I wish she had said something when I asked the day before, because everything was already finished. She then asked if I could make a separate portion just for her with very minimal seasoning. At that point, I was honestly exhausted. The kitchen was already a mess, the food was done, and guests were about to arrive. I told her I could not remake part of the meal, but she was welcome to eat the sides, which included rice bread and a salad. I also offered to order something for her if she preferred. She seemed annoyed but did not say much in the moment. Once everyone arrived and we sat down to eat, Maya barely touched her plate. She stayed quiet throughout the meal and ended up leaving earlier than everyone else. The next day, she messaged me and said I had been rude and inconsiderate as a host, and that I made her feel left out by not accommodating her taste preferences. I understand that food preferences can be important, and I do feel bad that she did not enjoy the dinner. At the same time, I feel like I did what I reasonably could. I asked in advance, cooked one shared meal, and offered alternatives when the issue came up too late to change things. I do not host people often, so I am still figuring out what proper hosting etiquette looks like, but I truly did not mean to make anyone feel excluded. Most of our mutual friends think I handled the situation fairly, but the conversation with Maya left me second-guessing myself. I am wondering if I should have pushed through my exhaustion and remade food just for her, or if it was reasonable to say no once everything was already done.